The jungle hummed with the sound of dawn, as Arya pushed through the tall grass, her breath steady and her heart alive with the quiet rush of adventure. She had been walking for hours, and every step pulled her deeper into a world that felt older than time. The air was thick with the scent of rain and leaves and distant earth, and somewhere beyond the trees a bird cried out, sharp and lonely, like a whistle that echoed through her bones. She wiped a strand of hair from her face and smiled. The forest was not just a place to her, it was a living thing, breathing, whispering, moving, with secrets that no one could ever fully tame. She loved that about it. She loved the way the world felt different here, raw and untamed, full of stories waiting to be discovered. Her backpack felt heavier than it had when she started, but she barely noticed it. The weight of her camera gear and notes was nothing compared to the pull of curiosity that kept her going. She had been following a set of tracks, small but distinct marks pressed into the damp earth, each one slightly deeper at the heel, which told her the animal was young and still learning balance. She crouched down, running her fingers lightly over one of the prints, feeling the moisture, the depth, the warmth of recent movement. It was closer than ever before. The sun was still low, casting thin golden beams through the canopy and painting everything in soft light. Arya could see motes of dust dancing in the air and the faint shimmer of spider webs glistening like silver threads. She had spent years studying wildlife, but there was something about this search that felt personal. The cub was more than a subject it bred, was a mystery, a spark that had pulled her out of cities and into wildlands, and she would not stop until she saw it with her own eyes. She took another step, careful not to break a branch or rustle a leaf. The forest responded to silence. It rewarded patience. She could hear her own heartbeat in the stillness, steady and strong. Somewhere in the distance, a stream gurgled over rocks, and the smell of fresh water drifted on the wind. She followed it, thinking the cub might be drawn there too. All creatures needed water and safety, and the edge of the river might be where she would find Boaz. She moved, the jungle changed around her, the light dimmed and the sounds deepened. She felt the presence of life hidden in every direction. The twitch of leaves, the flutter of wings, the quiet snap of a twig far behind her, but she did not turn. Fear had no place here, only focus. And Arya paused, finally, on a small rise, overlooking the river, her eyes scanning the undergrowth. Every muscle ready, every sense sharpened, and for the briefest moment she thought she saw movement, a flicker of gold among the ferns, too quick to be sunlight. Her pulse quickened. She knelt down slowly, her breath shallow, her mind clear. She whispered softly as if the forest could hear her, "I am here, little one. I am not your enemy. I just want to see you." Wind shifted, carrying the scent of something wild, something alive, and Arya smiled, knowing that the day was only just beginning. Arya stayed crouched on the small rise for a long moment, letting her eyes adjust to the soft green shadows that wrapped around the forest. The river below shimmered in the pale light, its surface rippling gently as the morning breeze swept across it. The air was thick with the hum of insects and the distant trill of unseen birds. Every sound carried meaning to her ears. She had learned that silence was never truly empty out here. It was alive with whispers and warnings, and sometimes with invitations. She listened carefully, her body stilled, her mind open, and in that stillness, she felt it again, that faint stirring in the brush, the sense of something watching her just beyond sight. She rose slowly, her knees brushing against wet leaves, her fingers tracing the edge of a fern as she steadied her breath. The tracks had led her here, and she knew she was closer than ever. Her heart beat faster, not from fear but from the sharp pull of anticipation. She moved toward the sound, one quiet step at a time, careful, deliberate, a hunter of moments rather than prey. She reached the bank and saw the mud rippled with new impressions, tiny paws pressed into the surface, one sliding mark that told her the cub had been playing, splashing. Even she smiled softly, imagining the young creature testing the world with every clumsy movement. The forest around her glowed faintly as the sun climbed higher, its light falling in golden shafts through the leaves. The river caught that light and scattered it into 1,000 reflections. Arya lifted her camera but did not use it yet. This moment was not meant for glass and lens, it was meant for being felt. She could sense how near the cub was, the air itself seemed to hum with its presence. She turned her head and caught sight of a small patch of fur moving behind a fallen log. Her breath caught in her throat. It was beautiful, far smaller than she had imagined, its coat patterned with faint stripes like sunlight through tall grass. It moved with a mix of grace and awkwardness, as if still learning how its body worked. Every step careful, every pause filled with curiosity. Its eyes gleamed bright and alive. She stayed perfectly still, afraid that even a breath too loud might break the fragile trust forming between them. The cub sniffed the air, its tiny nose twitching, its ears flicking toward every rustle. It took one step, then another, its gaze locked on Arya, as if trying to decide whether she was part of this world or an intruder. Arya knelt lower, her hands resting on the cool earth, her voice a whisper softer than the wind. "It's all right, little one, I won't hurt you." For a heartbeat, the cub froze, its muscles tight, then it relaxed, just slightly enough to lower its head and take another step forward, the space between them closing inch by inch. Arya could feel the wild energy radiating from it, raw and untamed and yet somehow innocent. She had seen many creatures in her life, but never one that made her feel this mix of awe and wonder and fragile connection. She did not move, she did not blink, she simply waited. The forest seemed to breathe around them, the world holding its breath, as the wild and the human drew nearer, drawn together by something older than fear, older than time itself. The cub hesitated, its small body caught between instinct and curiosity, its fur glimmering faintly under the growing light. The forest air seemed to grow heavier around them, filled with the scent of damp moss and distant rain. Arya stayed perfectly still, her muscles burning from holding the same crouched position, but she did not care. She knew that one sudden movement could send the cub darting back into the shadows, and she could not bear to lose sight of it now, not when she had come this far. The cub sniffed again, its little nose twitching as it studied her. The tension between them was almost electric, a silent conversation unfolding through the air. Arya could feel her pulse echoing in her fingertips, her mind whispering patience. Over and over, she knew the rules of the wild. You never rush trust, you earn it one heartbeat at a time. A bird cried somewhere above them, breaking the stillness for a moment, and the cub flinched, its head jerking up, its eyes wide and alert. Arya, her expression letting calm wash through her body. Animals could feel fear, they could also feel peace. She let her voice rise, barely above the wind, gentle and steady. "Easy, little one. I am not here to hurt." You've cub tilted its head, its golden eyes narrowing as if it were thinking. Then it took another step forward, the mud squelched beneath its paws. Arya almost laughed with relief, but she swallowed the sound, keeping her breathing slow and quiet. The cub was so close now that she could see the faint tremor in its flank, the rise and fall of its breath, quick and uncertain, like a child testing courage. A movement in the trees behind her made her glance over her shoulder for a split second, a rustle, a shadow, a flick of movement, and when she turned back, the cub was gone. Her heart sank. She searched the undergrowth, eyes darting left and right. Then she saw it again, perched halfway up a fallen tree trunk, staring down at her with a look that seemed almost playful. Her lips curved into a smile. "So you want to play, little one?" She moved slowly, circling around the log, careful not to break the connection between them, every motion deliberate, quiet. She had studied predator behavior long enough to know this was a test the cub wanted, to see if she would chase, if she would threaten, if she would act like prey. She did none of those things. She simply waited, letting the creature make the next move. The cub crouched low, its muscles rippling beneath its fur, its tail flicking side to side, and in that instant Arya knew what was coming. The leap was inevitable. It was written in the stillness and the growing spark between them. She felt her heart race, but she did not retreat. She steadied her stance, ready for whatever the wild would bring. The forest seemed to fade away, the world narrowing to the space between her and the cub, to the pulse of life that thrummed through them. Both time held its breath. The cub's body tensed, and Arya smiled softly, knowing that the moment she had been waiting for was about to unfold. The cub launched itself into the air in one sudden burst of motion, a streak of gold and shadow that cut through the stillness like lightning. Arya barely had time to react, her instincts taking over before thought could even form. Her arms moved upward, her body turning with the momentum, and in that perfect instant her hands closed around the small warm body that collided with her chest. The impact sent her spinning, her boots sliding slightly in the soft earth, and she let out a laugh, bright and full of joy, that echoed through the trees. The cub wriggled in her arms, not in fear but in surprise, its little claws catching lightly on her jacket, its heartbeat fluttering fast against her palm. She could feel the power beneath its softness, the pulse of something wild and untamed, yet still too young to know the full meaning of danger. Arya spun once more, her laughter mingling with the sound of rustling leaves and the faint rush of the river nearby. It was as if the forest itself joined her in that wild dance. For a heartbeat, time stopped. She stood there holding the cub mid-spin, her hair loose and tangled, the sunlight breaking through the canopy above, painting the air in streaks of gold and green. She looked into the cub's eyes and saw not fear but curiosity, raw and bright, like the dawn itself. She whispered softly, "See, little bung, no harm, only wonders." Slowly she lowered herself to her knees, still holding the cub against her chest. Its tiny body, tense but not struggling anymore, the warmth of it seeped into her arms, grounding her to the earth around them. She could smell the faint musk of its fur mixed with the scent of wet leaves and soil, her heart still racing. She had dreamed of this moment, not the capture, not the study, but the connection, the proof that trust could exist even between worlds so different. The cub blinked, its gaze darting from her face to the trees, to the river, then back to her again. Its tail twitched. Uncertainly, it was trying to understand what she was trying to be. She smiled softly, whispering again, "Easy, little one, you are safe." Now the words came out more as breath than sound, but the cub seemed to feel their meaning. Its muscles relaxed ever so slightly, and it let out a low huff that sounded almost like a siria. Sat there for a while, unmoving, her knees pressing into the cool ground, her hands cradling the fragile heartbeat of the wild. She could feel the forest breathing with her, the slow rhythm of something vast and ancient wrapping around them both. She realized then that she was no longer an observer in this world. She was part of it. Just another creature drawn by curiosity and courage. The cub shifted again, lifting one paw to rest on her forearm. Its claws tiny but sharp. It stared at her for a long time, as if memorizing her face. And for that small, perfect moment, everything else faded. The research, the exhaustion, the noise of the outside world, all gone, replaced by a silence so full it felt sacred. The cub rested in her arms for what felt like forever, its small chest rising and falling against her own, the sound of its breathing, soft and steady like the rhythm of the forest. Arya could feel her own heartbeat, slowing, matching the calm that had settled between them. She'd imagined this moment so many times while studying tracks and broken twigs and blurred photographs, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of it, the warmth, the weight, the fragile trust that hung in the air like mists. She looked down at the cub, its fur glinting faintly in the light that slipped through the trees. Tiny specks of dirt clinging to its paws, its eyes wide and alert. Even in stillness she could tell it was fighting. An inner instinct, torn between running and staying, and somehow choosing to stay felt like a miracle. She knew she could not hold it forever. The wild was not meant to be contained, but for now she allowed herself to simply exist in the moment. A faint rustle came from the bushes nearby, and Arya turned her head slightly, listening. The jungle was never quiet. It whispered constantly. With life and danger and mystery, she could feel the shift in the air, the way the forest seemed to pulse around her. Every sound layered over the other, a symphony of unseen creatures. She knew she should be cautious, but there was something peaceful here. Something that told her she was safe, for now the cub stirred, its tiny claws brushing against her wrist, its eyes flicking toward the sound too, and she realized that maybe it was not just her being watched, maybe they both were. She smiled softly, speaking under her breath, the way she always did when working with animals. "You are not alone, little one. We never really are." Slowly reached into her pocket, pulling out a small strip of dried meat she had brought for emergencies. The scent was strong, earthy. She held it out flat on her palm, letting the cub decide. The choice was his. The cub hesitated, sniffing, then leaned forward, taking the piece gently, its teeth barely grazing her skin. The trust in that simple motion sent a wave of awe through her. She had earned something no camera or notebook could capture, a connection that belonged only to this moment in time. The cub chewed clumsily, then licked her palm once, a rough, small gesture that made her laugh. Quietly, it startled her how natural it felt, how right it seemed to sit here on the forest floor with a creature born of instinct and survival resting against her like an old friend. She could almost forget the world outside the forest, the emails, the deadlines, the noise. For a while neither of them moved. The forest carried on around them, insects buzzing, birds calling, the river murmuring softly, and Arya breathed it all in. She felt like she had stepped into the pulse of something eternal. Something older than science, older than fear. She looked at the cub one last time and whispered, "We are both exactly where we should be." The sun had climbed higher above the trees, and the forest had begun to shimmer with heat, the air thick and heavy with the scent of earth and sap. Arya shifted slightly, her legs stiff from crouching too long. The cub blinked up at her, its fur shining in the golden light, its eyes bright with a curious gleam. It had stopped eating, and now simply watched her as if trying to read her thoughts. She smiled softly, realizing how strange and beautiful this moment truly was. Two creatures from different worlds sitting together as if it were the most natural thing on earth. The cub tilted its head and let out a small sound, not quite a growl, not quite a purr, something caught between play and uncertainty. Arya tilted her head too, mimicking its gesture, and the cub responded with a small huff that sounded almost like amusement. She laughed quietly, the sound blending with the rustle of the leaves. Above her she could feel the forest watching her, not in threat but in quiet wonder, as if even the trees understood the weight of what was unfolding. Then the cub stood, stretching its small body, its back arching, its tail flicking lazily. It padded a few steps away from her, then turned to glance back, its golden eyes meeting hers. Arya rose slowly, careful not to startle it. She knew it might leave at any moment, and she was ready for that. She had already received more than she ever expected: the trust, the laughter, the connection. These were gifts beyond her research, but the cub did not run. Instead, it walked toward the river, its paws silent on the forest floor. Arya followed at a respectful distance, watching the way it moved, every motion fluid and sure. Even in its youth, there was something regal about it, something ancient, the kind of grace that no human could ever imitate. The river sparkled through the trees ahead, and when they reached the bank, the cub leaned down to drink, its reflection rippling on the water like gold and fire. Arya knelt a few feet away, her camera hanging untouched around her neck. She wanted to capture this scene, but she could not bring herself to break the spell. The cub looked up at her for a moment, its mouth dripping with water, then it stepped closer again, sniffing at her boots, curious and unafraid. She let it approach until it was only inches away, her heart full with quiet. A dragonfly hovered above them, its wings catching the sunlight, and the cub followed it with its gaze, its body lowering as if ready to pounce again. Arya laughed softly, remembering the moment before when it had leapt at her legs. She wondered if it would try again, if play was part of its way of understanding the world. The forest breeze carried the scent of rain, and she looked up, seeing dark clouds gathering beyond the canopy. The jungle was shifting again, changing tone as the day prepared to surrender to storm, and Arya knew this would be the moment that decided everything, whether the cub would stay or vanish back into the wild. The first rumble of thunder rolled across the forest, deep and low, like the growl of something ancient waking from sleep. The cub lifted its head, ears twitching, its eyes darting toward the darkening sky. Arya looked up to, feeling the pressure of the air change around them. The soft wind turned cooler, carrying with it the smell of rain and electricity. She knew the storm would come fast. In this part of the jungle, storms always did, sudden and fierce, like the heartbeat of the wild. The cub seemed uncertain, its tail flicking back and forth, its gaze shifting between her and the trees beyond the river. Arya crouched low again, her hands resting lightly on her knees. Trying to look as calm as she could, she whispered softly to the cub, her voice steady and low. "Easy, little one, the rain will not hurt us. We will be fine together." For a moment, it seemed to listen, its breathing slowing, its small body relaxing, just slightly, as if comforted by the rhythm of her voice. Flash of lightning lit the sky bright white for a split second, turning every leaf, every branch into a silhouette of silver and shadow. The cub flinched but did not run. Arya felt a rush of pride at its bravery. She could feel the wildness in it, the same kind that lived quietly in her own heart, the kind that loved the storm not for its fury but for its truth. Rain began in soft drops that quickly grew into a curtain of water, falling through the canopy above, soaking her hair, her jacket, her boots. The cub shook itself, sending tiny droplets flying into the air. It looked up as if puzzled by the sky, then let out a small chirping sound that almost made her laugh. She stretched out her hand, palm open, letting the rain pool in it, then drip back to the earth. The cub watched her, curious, again before stepping closer, its fur slick with water, its golden eyes shining like molten amber in the wide river swelled slightly, its song growing louder, the air filled with sound, the crash of rain, the roar of thunder, the heartbeat of nature in full voice. Arya felt alive, her senses sharpened, every breath electric. She reached out slowly, her hand hovering near the cub's head, and this time it did not pull away. It leaned closer, pressing its damp fur against her fingers, and in that instant she felt something deeper than understanding. It was recognition. Two souls meeting in the chaos of the world. They stayed like that as the storm raged around them, the forest no longer silent but alive in a way that made her chest ache. With wonder, she had never felt so small and yet so infinite, so utterly connected to the pulse of life itself. She looked at the cub, its small frame trembling slightly from the cold, and she whispered, almost without thinking, "Come with me, little one, we will find shelter." The cub blinked up at her, and for a heartbeat she thought it understood It turned its head toward the trees and began to move slowly, glancing back to make sure. She followed, and she did every step careful, through the rain, through the mud, through the wild beating heart of the storm. The rain fell harder now, turning the earth beneath their feet into soft mud that clung to their boots and paws. The forest blurred into shades of green and silver, the air filled with the constant sound of falling water. Arya followed the cub as it weaved through the trees, its movements quick but sure, as if it already knew where safety could be found. Her hair was plastered against her face and her clothes were soaked through, but she barely noticed. Her only focus was keeping up with the small shape darting ahead of her through the mist. The cub led her along a narrow trail that twisted between moss-covered rocks and roots, the river's voice fading behind them, replaced by the steady roar of the storm. She could feel her pulse racing, not from fear but from the wild exhilaration of being part of something raw and real. She had never trusted an animal like this before, and yet she followed without hesitation, because something deep within her told her that it was right, that this was what she had been searching for all along. Lightning flashed again, lighting up the forest in white brilliance for an instant, and she saw the cub pause ahead of her at the base of a large fallen tree, its trunk hollowed by time and covered in vines. It looked like the perfect shelter. The cub slipped inside, disappearing into the darkness. Arya hesitated for only a breath before ducking in. After it, the hollow was warm compared to the rain outside, dry in places and filled with the smell of old wood and life. The cub was curled at the far end, shaking slightly from the cold, its fur damp and matted. Arya knelt beside it, careful not to startle it. She shrugged off her wet jacket and placed it near the opening to block some of the rain. Then she sat back cross-legged and watched the cub. It looked at her for a long time, unblinking, before crawling a little closer, drawn by her warmth. She smiled softly, holding out her hand again, and this time it pressed its small head against her palm. Without fear, the thunder rolled above them, echoing through the trees, but inside their shelter it felt distant, muted, almost like a lullaby. Arya could feel the cub's body trembling still, and she began to hum softly a tune she barely remembered from her childhood, something her mother used to sing when storms shook their old house. The sound was low and steady, blending with the rhythm of the rain outside, and after a while the cub began to relax, its breathing slowing until it rested its head lightly on her leg. She looked down at it, her heart swelling with emotion. She had studied animals for years, taken notes, recorded data, measured patterns, but nothing had prepared her for this, the pure, simple trust of a wild creature resting beside her as the storm raged on. She felt the truth of it deep in her chest, that some connections were not made by science, but by spirit, by something older than words. Outside, the rain began to soften, turning from roar to whisper, and the forest slowly exhaled the tension of the storm. The world felt new, again washed clean by the downpour. Arya brushed her fingers gently through the cub's damp fur, and whispered softly, "We made it, little one. We made it through the wild together." The rain faded into a soft mist that drifted through the trees like smoke. The air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. The storm had passed, leaving behind a stillness that felt sacred. Arya sat quietly in the hollow of the fallen tree, her back resting against the cool wood. The cub still curled beside her, its breathing slow and even. She could feel the rhythm of its tiny heartbeat through the damp fabric of her clothes. She let her hand rest gently on its back, feeling the rise and fall, the warmth. The life outside the forest was waking again, birds calling from the canopy, insects buzzing softly as if singing. To the returning light, thin streams of sunlight filtered through the leaves, turning the mist into gold. Arya watched the light shift across the cub's fur and thought about how strange it was that something so wild, so unpredictable, could also feel so peaceful. She had come here searching for data, for patterns, for answers, but what she found was something no book could ever teach her. She found belonging. After a while, the cub stirred, stretching its legs, its claws scraping lightly against the wood. It blinked up at her and gave a small huff that made her smile. She reached out, brushing a few bits of leaves from its fur, and whispered, "Good morning, little one." The cub blinked again, as if listening, then stepped out from the hollow into the open forest. Its paws leaving faint prints in the soft ground. Arya followed more slowly, her muscles stiff from sitting too long. When she emerged, the forest looked completely new, washed and shining, the air cool and sharp with the scent of rain. She could see steam rising from the earth where sunlight touched the wet ground. The cub was only a few feet ahead, standing in a shaft of golden light, its head lifted, its body still. It looked both fragile and powerful, a creature born from both play and survival. For a moment Arya thought it might stay with her, that maybe it would follow her steps back through the trees, but then she saw the change in its posture, the way its ears turned toward some unseen sound deep in the forest. She understood immediately the wild was calling it home. She felt a soft ache in her chest, but it was not sadness, it was gratitude. She knelt once more, and said quietly, "Go on now, you are free, always were." The cub looked back one last time, its eyes catching the sunlight bright and gnawing, then it turned and disappeared into the trees. Its golden fur blending with the light until it was gone. Arya stayed there a long time, listening to the forest breathing around her, the sound of life moving on. She smiled to herself, feeling the rainwater on her skin, the mud under her hands, the pulse of the world steady and eternal. When she finally rose, she felt lighter, her heart full, her mind quiet. She knew she would leave this place soon, but a part of her would remain here forever, in the moment where wild and human met in laughter and trust. She took one last look at the forest, whispered, "Thank you too," the silence, and began her walk back through the trees, her steps soft, her soul awake.